throughout all of my school years, I always felt like the whole thing was a little bit stupid. And I remember especially in 11th grade, in the start of 11th grade, after I turned 17, I got a little bit of a very bitter period in my life where I was questioning the whole thing. I was like, why the hell am I coming here every single day? I am not learning anything useful. All of my teachers are fucking retards. I will never apply any of this shit in my real life. I don't even want to go to university. And why do I spend every single one of my days here and then going home and maybe trying to study for something? But I actually even stopped studying for anything because I didn't see the point in it. And now that I've already been out of school for a while, I think I have a little bit of a clearer, better look at it. And I can see better what I actually learned. But I'm not going to talk about like, oh, math and history, because I actually don't remember any of that shit. It was all completely useless, I'm not going to lie. And I think I did a lot of things really well in school that I kind of learned in school, not from school and not from my teachers. I've learned all of these lessons from myself, and that's what I'm going to talk about today. The very first lesson that I've learned in school is that average people will pull you down. This is always the case, and I'm not talking about some Sigma male grind set and like, you know, you have to be a lone wolf and everything and don't listen to the people. I mean, yeah, like don't listen to the people, but I guess what I really want to say here is, you know, there's all of the Sigma grind set memes and you need to be a lone wolf and just focus on yourself thing. That's fucking stupid. I don't believe in that at all. But the average person is mediocre as fuck. And if you don't want to become mediocre, don't listen to mediocre people. Seriously, just look around yourself and see the first 10 people that you can see that you actually have somewhat of a connection with. So I'm not talking about like go out and see your neighbor who you've talked 2 words with. For an example, let's say your mom and dad, your teachers, your 5 best friends. Do you want to be like any of them? Probably not. Maybe there are some character traits and some skills that they have that you also want to have in the future. But like totally, do you want to become like any of them? Probably not. The average person sucks so much. Now, by all means, you can listen to the average person, but I just want to remind you that the average person is overweight. The average person has a caffeine addiction. The average person probably has a nicotine addiction as well. The average person is broke. And I don't mean crackhead broke, but the average person is not rich. The average person doesn't live a life where you can do whatever you want. An average person doesn't live a life where you don't have to stress about going on 2 weeks of vacation per year. The average person is also unhappy and unfulfilled. And the average person will die due to something that was purely created by poor lifestyle choices. Literally, the average person will die at their age because of their choice. The most common cause of death in the world, or maybe not the world, because I guess it's probably like a lot of people are dying in other countries, not for the same reason, but in the more developed countries, the most common cause of death is heart disease. Heart disease is completely avoidable if you make good lifestyle choices. If you go back like 100 years, people didn't die of fucking heart disease. The people that die today because of heart disease, they die because everybody's fucking overweight. Everybody's living a shitty life full of stress. The kind of shit that we eat is absolutely insane. People don't exercise, and with all of these comes the heart disease. But all of these were avoidable. All you had to do was make good choices throughout your life, and the average person failed at that. Literally, all you had to do to not die at, let's say, 75 years old. I don't know what the average lifespan is. All you had to do to not die at 75 years old was to not eat fucking McDonald's every single week and to go maybe either to the gym or just go out for a run or play basketball with your friends every single week, like twice or 3 times. Yeah, and also sleep maybe 8-9 hours. That's all you had to do. And you failed at that, and you died. If you did all of those, maybe you could have lived like 10 years longer. So that's the average person for you. The average person also has $22,713 of debt in America. Like, this is literally so easy to avoid as well. Go ahead, listen to the average person. I have 0 debt. I don't have a single fucking penny of debt. And I'm never going to have it. And now if you're like, yeah, but why do you have to flame the average person so much? It's fine to be average. No, like, It's fine to be average, but do you want to be average? Do you want to be like this? Do you want to have a caffeine addiction? Do you want to die because of choices that you made? Do you want to cause your own death? Because these people don't die of old age. They just cause their own death. Just look at your teachers. Do you want to become like any of them? Maybe there's one or two of them that are pretty good, but do you want to be like them? Fuck no. Do you want to be like your average teacher? Not that one or two teachers that you like. The average of them. Fuck no, you don't want to be any of them. And this is a very weird thought that I thought about when I was in school, is that we are learning how to lead our lives. We're learning every day from people who were stupid enough to become teachers. And I'm saying this this may sound a little bit disrespectful towards teachers. And I don't hate teachers. It's where I'm coming from. The education system is absolutely horrendous. Becoming a teacher is one of the worst things that you can do in your life. And all of these people decided to become teachers and somehow try to teach us how to create a good life for ourselves when their life is fucking terrible. And the reason for this is because they became teachers. There's also obviously a lot of other reasons, but what I'm trying to say is these people became teachers by choice, even though they knew that being a teacher fucking sucks. And also most of them never wanted to become teachers. When you go to your school, just look at your average teacher. Do you think he or she enjoys what he or she is doing? Fuck no. Do you think that was their dream? No, it wasn't. They already fucked up, and you're learning from these people. Now, when I think back to my life, I never really wanted to go to university. Ever since from a very early age, when I was really young, there was not a lot of talk about what I will do in the future. And I never really thought about going to university. Then later on, when it came closer and closer, I was more and more like, that's not what I want to do. And I can imagine 100 things for myself except that. And when I went to high school, at that point I was kind of like 90% sure that I didn't want to go to university. And I knew that, and I told people that, and everybody fucking wanted to get me onto their path, even though I was trying to go on my own path. Everybody tried to take me from my path, and I'm still going on my path. And that's something I learned. You have to go on your own path, and you cannot let the average person decide everything for you, because first of all, you become mediocre just like them, and you won't be happy. You will be like, fuck, when you're 80 years old and you're in your deathbed, or actually no, because you died before becoming 80 years old because you listened to the average person and you try to be like them, and you got heart disease at 70 something. But when you're at 70 something and you have heart disease and you're laying on your hospital bed, your deathbed, you're gonna think back to your life like, I was such a pussy for always trying to conform and just listen to other people instead of going against them when I had to, just to keep going on my own path. That's where you're going to think, more than likely, if you leave your own path to pursue somebody else's path, something that they push onto you. And I never did that. Luckily, I'm still on my own path and I'm fucking happy. I'm living not necessarily the life I want for my future, but the life that I wanted for myself at this time where I'm at. I'm living that life. I did everything as I wanted to. Nobody could get me off from my path. At some point, my mindset got a little bit weaker, and I'm not gonna lie, there were some periods when I was considering going to university, and many times I was tempted and I was like, yeah, like maybe choosing this path would be better, but I was always like, I'm not that kind of person. And the way we have schooling where I come from is you have 8 years of, I think it's called elementary school or primary school or something, and then you have 4 years of high school. And in the very first year of high school, in the very first months, I decided that I'm going to move out. I always knew that I would move out of my country, but I didn't really have like a solid idea of what I would do and where. And at that time I decided at the very beginning of high school that this is where I'm gonna move, and I actually didn't end up moving there, but kind of close to it because of other factors. But the thing is, I decided early on, this is where I'm gonna move, this is what I'm gonna do, these are my plans, and nobody can get me off of that. And so many people tried. They were hammering the fucking store every single hour of every single day. Like, I'm not fucking kidding you. The amount of times I've heard from all of my teachers, no, I think it's not a good idea, and why don't you first go to university here and then move out? Then you will at least have a job that you can work already when you go out, and all of that shit. The amount of people that try to tell me, don't go there, it's not gonna be good. I've heard it from so many people. They were like, I moved out, I was living abroad for 10 years and it was bad, and I moved back and now I have a terrible fucking life, but you should do the same thing as me. I didn't do the same thing as them. I'm happy as fuck. I enjoy my life here. Everything's good. Everything went just as I planned, bro. And none of these people were right. If you ever want to become something in life, and chances are you probably do want to become something in life, what you need is individuality and creativity. You can live your life like a robot, but it's not gonna be very enjoyable, and that's exactly what school tries to make you do. You probably don't remember when you were a kid, but if you ask a group of kids, can you sing? I think this was some study or something, I've heard it somewhere, but even if it wasn't, if you just think about it, if you ask a group of kids in maybe kindergarten, they're like 6 years old, you ask them, can you sing? They will all say yeah, or at least most of them will say yeah. If you ask a group of adults, maybe one is gonna say yes, or maybe zero. The same goes for drawing and a lot of different things. One thing that school does very well is kill all of the creativity from children. And the only way to keep your creativity is to not listen to the fucking people. They're trying to kill it and they're trying to take it from you. It's very funny how school has art class and music class and all of that shit. And they're like, yeah, bro, we have to educate you in this as well because it's important. They're actually trying to take these things away from you. And I'm not trying to give some sort of conspiracy theory or anything. That's not the goal here. I'm just saying the education that I received, what I got was I could sing and draw and I enjoyed all of these things. Then I went to school and we were at music class and I began to sing and I got a fucking 3 out of 5. And then I was like, what the fuck? And then I learned that I couldn't sing. And I learned that I couldn't draw because I was also getting shitty grades at art class. And I was like, what the fuck, bro? And the only thing that I've learned is what I'm doing was bad. Fuck all of that shit.
I'd like to stop here for a second and talk about an experience that I've had in elementary school. Art class in elementary school was the teacher just came in, told us what to draw and how to draw it exactly. So in that way, your creativity was kind of already diminished because you couldn't use it. You weren't able to because you couldn't use your own style. You couldn't use... You couldn't draw the thing that you saw as you saw it. You had to draw it exactly as it was. And then the teacher would literally fucking sit down, eat her lunch, and then at the end of the class, everybody would come to her. She would look for like 5 seconds at every single painting or drawing, rate it, which usually wasn't a 5. And she never helped us with anything. The only thing we learned is that what we were doing sucked and it wasn't good, but we never really learned what was good. On the other hand, I somehow got into like an extracurricular activity, which was called graphics, which was basically an art class after all of my other classes that I didn't have to go to, but honestly, I don't even know how the fuck I ended up being there because I always hated art class. But this class was fucking awesome. I hated the regular art class that we had in our timetable, but this one was much better because here we didn't get any grades. We could draw whatever we wanted to. The teacher always gave us an idea that you guys can draw this, but you can also draw something else if you want to. And he would just go around and help everybody. And if you were drawing something else, ask for your ideas about how you want to do it, what you want to accomplish exactly, and try to teach you techniques about how to accomplish what you want to. And this is how regular art class should also look like, in my opinion, because already when it comes to grading art, it's like, like you can also grade music. Somebody who listens to Taylor Swift or something is going to listen to Despel Omega and is going to be like, this is fucking shit. And then another person is going to go like, this is the most amazing thing I've ever heard. The same with Mozart. So you cannot really rate art. But even if you try to do it, why the fuck would you try doing it with children? And why the fuck would you do it when you never even help them in how to get a good rating on their art?
And something closely linked to that is individuality, which they are also trying to kill. And I don't give a shit if it's intentional or unintentional. And again, I'm not trying to paint any conspiracy theories or anything. That's just simple facts. All you need to do is go pay attention at class, do well in school, get good grades like everybody else, go home and study and all of that shit. And nobody gives a shit about what you want. Nobody gives a shit about what you are like. Nobody gives a fuck about your hobbies. Nobody gives a fuck about what you enjoy doing. Like, have you ever got asked the question in school, other than like trying to introduce yourself, because nobody actually gives a shit about it. Have you ever got asked the question other than that, do you play any instruments? Or what's your favorite hobby? What do you enjoy doing outside of school? No, because nobody gives a fuck about that. In fact, as school becomes more and more difficult and you have to study more and more, you will have less and less time for all of that, and they will literally just take all of that from you. All of your creativity, your individuality, you will just become like everybody else because you won't have any time to do what you want. Look at the amount of small kids that do some sort of sport or play some instrument or do any of the things. I'm talking before school. Then look at what happens after primary school. A lot less of them are doing the same thing. But then comes high school. Look at what happens after high school. When I started high school, a lot of people were doing this and that. When I quitted high school, I didn't quit, I graduated, nobody was doing anything. Everybody stopped everything. So if you're in school, you will have to fight this oppression of your individuality. And one very good story that I have that gives you a very nice and accurate picture of the mediocrity of the average person is, I remember when I was in English class in 11th grade and we were talking about sleep, and the teacher asked the people, keep in mind, when you're in 11th grade, you're like 17 years old. So you're almost an adult, but kind of still a kid. And you should still have a lot of time on your hands. And the teacher asked like, how many hours are you getting of sleep? And like, who gets 8 hours here? And like, nobody fucking put their hand up. And I was like, hey, like, here I am. And she asked me like, how much do you sleep on average? I was like, I'm trying to sleep like 9 hours every single day. And everyone was like, what? How do you have time for that? And I was like, what the fuck do you mean, how do I have time for that? And they were telling me all of their shit, like, oh, I'm so busy. Bro, I was going to the gym. I was getting top grades at school in the subjects that mattered. I was getting 9 hours of sleep every single night. And all of these people were just fucking scrolling social media and saying, well, I don't have any time. It's fucking bullshit, okay? And this really paints the mediocrity of the average person. And this was, keep in mind, when we were 17 motherfucking years old. We weren't old. We weren't super old. There were already a bunch of people who had, I wouldn't necessarily say they were obese, but they were already overweight. There were already a couple of kids who every single time I sit in this class, they were drinking Red Bull or some, we were too poor for Red Bull, but something else. The cheap, more poisonous equivalent of it. And so in 11th grade, I was already like a weirdo. I wasn't like really a weirdo, but I was already kind of considered weird for sleeping enough. The second thing is time management. If there's one skill in life that's really important and that can really save your life, it's this one. Time management is you deciding for yourself what you are gonna do with your life and you making good decisions about it. If your time management skills are shit, when you're gonna be on your deathbed at 70 something years old, you're gonna be like, I don't even know what the fuck I did with my life. If your time management skills are good and you actually did what you wanted to most of the time, you're gonna be like, yeah, I did this, I did that, I did a bunch of shit that I wanted, and you're gonna feel much happier. Time management is, again, one of the most important skills, and that's something that I've learned a lot of in school because I had to learn to manage my time because there wasn't a lot of it. The number one thing that you have to learn when it comes to time management is if you don't do it, somebody else will. If you don't decide what you will do with your own time, if you don't manage your own time, somebody else will. Somebody else will come and say, do this at this time, do that at that time. You have to learn to manage your free time well. And a lot of the free time, especially in school, doesn't actually seem like free time. A lot of the times when you have free time, it might not be 100% free. So a lot of the free time that you have when you're in school is when you're in school. And if you treat all of the time like, oh, always just school time, then you're gonna be much more behind than me, who's not treating it like that. Every single year that I was in high school, for the most part, I was always trying to use my time productively when I had free time at school. And a lot of that free time was free time that I had to discover, because sometimes we would get like empty classes, which means that some teacher was missing, and you would have a like 45 or 50 minutes when nobody would come to teach you anything. You'd have like 45, 50 minutes of literally free time where you could do whatever you want, but maybe you couldn't exit the school building or something. And almost everybody was treating that time as like, oh, I'm in prison, I just have to get rid of the time somehow, I just have to, spend the time somehow and just do something so I don't get bored. I treated that time like a fucking maniac. I try to always either read something or learn a language or do something useful. I was always trying to do something and get ahead in life, where all of the other fucking people were playing chess on their phone or some stupid shit like that. But if you're in school, chances are there's also a lot of free time elsewhere that you have to realize that is not very obvious. Like when you're in a certain class, one teacher maybe doesn't pay any attention to whether you're on your phone or not, and that class doesn't matter at all. The grade that you get on it doesn't really matter. You should get like an okay grade, but it doesn't matter if you get a shit grade. It just shouldn't be like complete shit. So you shouldn't fail the class, obviously. But doesn't matter if you get a very good grade or not. No. So in that class, the teacher is also not paying attention. You can do whatever the fuck you want. Now you have a class every single week where you can actually move forward with your goals. You can learn a language, you can read, you can try to learn programming or some other skill. And something I see there was quite a big shift from my parents' generation to my generation in the country where I'm coming from, is that when my mom went to school, she was like, yeah, maybe I wasn't the best student, but I was always pretty decent at everything. And I tried to always study for everything. In the modern day, obviously it will depend on which country you're in. In the country where I'm coming from, this doesn't work at all. You either prioritize or you fucking become mediocre in everything. You cannot be good at everything in school anymore. Nobody can tell me that, like, yeah, sure, you can get 5s, or for us the best grade was 5, but you can get A's in everything. You can be straight A's in every single class, but then your life will suck. You will either not sleep enough, or you won't have any social life, or you won't have any free time left for your hobbies or any of that. And so you will have to learn to make decisions on what's important and what isn't. You will have to decide which subjects matter to you and which subjects don't. And the ones that don't matter to you, you can just ignore them. Just ignore them as much as you can, except for, maybe like don't fail the classes, obviously. But dude, every single year in high school, I had like 10 different subjects. If I would have focused 100% on getting A's in every single one of them, I wouldn't even be here right now. And I know that a lot of people will get this pressure, especially from their parents, when your dad is saying like, my parents also used to say shit like that when they were like, oh, but that kid has straight A's from every subject, but you don't. And I was like, I don't give a flying fuck, bro. I'm not gonna suck my teacher's dick to get an A in fucking art class, like. And I think especially as a parent, it's very easy to point the finger at the girl or guy in the class who has straight A's from everything. But if that person would be your son or your daughter, that person is probably so fucking utterly uninteresting that you couldn't even spend 5 minutes with that person. I'm very interested to see what the people have become 10 years from now who got straight A's in every single subject in high school versus me. Because I can already see a huge difference. You know what the big difference is? I speak 4 languages. all of the fucking people who I went to the same class with speak at most 3, but usually 2. And even at those 2, they're not very good. They're like, I mean, obviously, on one of them, they're not very good. On the other one, it's our own language, so you can't possibly be that bad at that. But every single one of these people didn't learn a single language in high school. We had English and German, like already every single person was speaking English, so that doesn't count, we already knew that. Then we had German. I had to sit through 4 years of fucking German classes, and I never paid attention. I tried to pay attention in like the first 2 weeks, and then I was like, fuck it, this shit is way too it wasn't that complicated, honestly, but I wasn't really interested in the language, and my teacher was an absolute fucking idiot. And frankly enough, I never learned it. I never fucking paid attention in class. I probably speak like 20 words in German, I can count to like 10, and I know a couple of words like Scheiße. But in the meantime, I learned 2 languages. All of these motherfuckers who paid attention in German class didn't even learn 1. Literally, there were people who paid attention to all of the classes throughout the 4 years. They got 5s or A's in every single test, maybe not every one of them, but most of them. They closed every year with an A, and these people didn't speak German. These people couldn't speak German fluently in the end. Well, I didn't pay attention to the fucking class. I almost failed, and I learned 2 fucking languages fluently. Then there was history class in 12th grade. The teacher was, again, a fucking idiot, and I never learned anything from him personally. But something I learned during his classes in 12th grade was typing with, like my 10 fingers on the keyboard. While the kid who was taking fucking notes very enthusiastically, we got the same grade on our finals. The same exact grade. This fucking tryhard kid was making his notes all of the time and like really organizing it. And this kid would write literally pages. She got an A. I got an A. We both got A's on our finals. It didn't fucking matter, but I learned another really valuable skill in the meantime. I barely paid attention in 25% of my classes. I never fucking paid attention in class. Like in my closing year, there was literally one single class where I was paying attention. I got straight A's on my finals. I could go to any university in that country. Any, literally. And I put in a fucking 10th of the effort of what other people put in who got the same result as me, but what they didn't get is they didn't learn 2 languages. They didn't learn typing with the 10 fingers. They didn't go to the gym. They didn't go to the gym 4 years in a row without skipping. They didn't build like 40 pounds of muscle in these 4 years. Like when I started high school, I was 66 kilograms. When I finished high school, I was like 91 kilograms, bro. I was fat as fuck, but I had a lot more muscle, and then after cutting down, I was like 79 and leaner when I was 66. So somebody can do the math, and that it's probably like 35, 40 pounds or something, considering in the leanness as well. I also planned my moving because I wanted to move countries. I learned the language. I did all of the research to know how much money I needed. I collected the money. This sounds really fucking weird, but yeah. And then I made it all happen. I was planning this shit for 4 years straight. Everybody was telling me not to do that and that my plans are bad. I didn't plan this out well enough. I didn't plan that out well enough. I'm here. I'm fucking good, thank you. I planned everything out well. Everything went exactly according to the plan. And I'm living a good life right now. I also started this YouTube channel. I also did my driver's license, which, it's not that difficult to do. Most people did it in the meantime, but I'm just saying it took quite a lot of time, and I was doing all of this other shit in the meantime. And I still graduated with fucking straight A's because, quite frankly, I don't know how it works in America or like any other country, but we had to take tests from like 5 subjects, and those are your finals. And then you're good. And I did all of those with straight A's. I was also sleeping like 8 to 9 hours every single day during all of my school years, and I'm not trying to like boast or like show off my achievements or anything, but I am kind of proud of them, but it's not that much. But it's so much more than what everybody else achieved, even though we had the same 24 hours of the day. And I got all of this done with good time management. I got all of this done by prioritizing certain things over other ones. I got all of this done with not paying attention in certain classes because they were completely fucking useless, bro. And I even had to go to the principal twice for not paying attention in German class. That was really funny. This guy was a really chill guy. I really loved him, and he was like, you know, he knew that we didn't have a choice in what language we wanted to learn and that we were fed up with all that shit. And if you don't know how the system works, it's like you get a bunch of grades for tests that you write during the year, and then at the end of the year they take an average of that. And if it's lower than 1.5, you're fucked because you're going to fail, and then you will have to take another exam. If you fail that as well, then you will have to repeat the year. Failing is something that never happened in that school, or I mean it did happen a couple of times I think, but I went to a pretty good school actually, and failing wasn't something that was very typical, and I was strategically almost failing German classes because you actually had to study in order to not fail them, but I was always trying to study the minimum amount in order to not fail them. And this guy was like, yeah, I get that you don't give a shit and all of that, but it's just, you can do more than getting by with 1.6. And I was like, no, principal, it's not 1.6, it's actually 1.7 now. That's a funny memory I had, because I knew that I'm not gonna fucking learn German. I knew that there's another language that I'm learning, that there was actually, like, there were already, I think, 2 other languages that I was learning at the time. And I was like, I'm not gonna fucking put any more effort into this shit than I need to, and it worked out. I never failed German class. I never learned German either, but instead I learned 2 more languages than everybody else who tried to pay attention and never learned fucking German either. The first thing that is very important is when to stand up for yourself and when to shut up. This is such an important skill, especially to adult life. I'd like to start with the fact that the majority of people actually need to stand up for themselves more. The majority of people, and therefore probably you as well, are pussies who don't stand up for themselves nearly as much as they should. Because in a lot of cases, standing up for yourself is gonna be the right choice. Because if you never stand up for yourself, like, how do you expect to be confident? How do you expect, just to feel like the man? To feel like the person who stands up for their values. How do you expect to feel like that when you don't actually do it? And you need to realize that a lot of people can't do anything to you, even though they feel threatening because maybe there's a teacher and you don't want to be like rude to that teacher, but the teacher is a fucking idiot and telling you every single day how idiot you are and telling you like you had to do this way, and you're like, no. I didn't have to do it that way, and you know that you're actually right. Yeah, obviously don't say that if the teacher can actually fuck you up, but if the teacher cannot do anything, then why wouldn't you stand up for yourself, bro? You need to stand up for yourself. And a lot of people they're just too afraid to do that. Now, I was, as a kid, and still on the opposite side of the spectrum, I just learned to control it a little bit more. I was always a strong individual who stood up for himself from a very early age, and that had a lot of consequences, especially when I was a little kid, because I had no filter, bro. When I was smaller, I would say everything that was on my mind, and a lot of time it didn't lead me to very good places. I always talked back to teachers that I didn't like. If I did like you as a teacher, I was fucking perfect. I was the perfect student if I did like you. So if you did kind of earn my respect, you had a very easy time influencing me. If you didn't get my respect, if I thought that you were stupid or you were not right, then you had to prepare for hell if you weren't strong to tolerate it and push back against it. Because I was fucking vicious, bro. I remember that there was this one math teacher, I literally made her life into hell every single time that she came into our classes, because I was so good at math. I was always a pretty good student, and I was especially good when it came to math. And this teacher was teaching us math, and I would always do my task and then start talking with the other people. I just wouldn't really pay attention, or I was always just, talking with others, and then she would start yelling at us and shit like that. There were a couple of smaller kids in the class, and we were literally bullying this fucking teacher. It was so funny. It was a little bit cruel looking back at it, but I mean, if you go to become a teacher, you have to be able to stand up for yourself. You have to be strong, and this teacher didn't have any fucking power over us. This teacher could never get us to be quiet. This teacher was never able to get me to not talk back to her. She never intentionally gave us a bad grade, even though you can actually do that in that system, which is something very fucked up. Like something you can do as a teacher, and there were other teachers who sometimes did that to me, is that you can just randomly type in a, what is it in fucking America, an F, I think. You know, they could just randomly type in the worst grade for you for just nothing. Even if you did nothing, actually, they could do the same shit. But if you misbehaved, they could just put in an F for you, and then you're fucked. But this teacher never did that, and I knew that she would never do it, and all she did was yell, which wasn't very effective.
She also wasn't very scary. We had another teacher though, who was a male. He was probably like 2 meters, maybe like 2 meters and 10 centimeters tall. He could barely go through the fucking door. He was probably like 120, maybe 130 kilograms. He treated us like soldiers. He would yell at everybody from the bottom of his lungs, or top of his lungs, maybe, I don't know. For no apparent reason, he would aggressively, randomly kick a football around in the classroom and just like kick it with full power into the wall, and we would like jump around because it would make like a terribly big noise, and we were all really quiet. So, and he also had a look on his face that basically signaled that if you misbehave, he's going to literally fucking bash your head against the wall, and he would even probably enjoy it. So we somehow never really fucked with that guy.
But there were a couple of other teachers when I was smaller who just didn't like me, and so decided to just fuck me in the ass. I mean, like, not literally, but with grades. I also picked completely pointless fights with my dad very, very often when I was a kid. I was always like talk back when he said something that I didn't agree with, that I didn't like. I was always like, no, fuck, Dad, this doesn't make any sense. And he would always just get angry. And, you know, I realized that none of this made any sense. And with school, I kind of learned that sometimes it is better to not stand up for yourself, even when you're right. But sometimes it is better. So most people need to work on that skill. I was a little bit on the opposite side. But no matter what side you are on, this is a skill that you can learn. And you should learn. Now, a little bit of a guide here. You have to stay quiet in 2 circumstances. The first one is when it's pointless to fight. So you're not really gaining anything, but you're losing a lot. A perfect example to that is when I was a small kid and I was fighting with my dad. We didn't agree on something, and he really wanted his point to be right because he thought that he was right all the time, and I thought that I was right all the time. And I would pick completely pointless fights, which didn't make any sense. And after a while I realized that it's so much easier to just listen to what he has to say, and then even if I think it's bullshit, just not say anything, just say okay. Because in those scenarios I never really gained that much from standing up for myself, except for that I knew that I could do it, but I did always have losses, which were either like, you know, the worsening of our relationships, or just having to listen to some pointless shit for hours. And since then I learned that that doesn't really make a lot of sense to do. Another thing is when you're arguing with strangers over something that doesn't matter. So you're talking with a random person who maybe you will see again like once in your life, or maybe never again, and you're talking with that person about something and they're not agreeing with you, and you already can see that they're fucking stupid. You see that you will never actually agree, and no matter how strongly you try to persuade them, they're not gonna agree with you. In those cases, it's completely pointless to try to stand up for yourself, because it doesn't matter. All it will catch you to do is you will have to partake in a fucking several hours long argument probably, which won't get any of you any forward. So in those cases, it's best to just shut the fuck up. If somebody says something stupid, you just say, okay, that's fine, I agree, bro. And then you're done. This will also make your life a lot less stressful if you currently pick a lot of fights and you try to like always stand up for yourself. The second, where you have to stay quiet and shut the fuck up, is when somebody can fuck you in some way. For an example, a teacher who does actually have some power over you, because you know, kids can kind of sense this, and I think you can sense it on everybody. There are gonna be teachers who are gonna be teaching a very important class, and maybe you don't want to get a bad grade on that, like math for me in the past, for an example, but that teacher was too much of a pussy to write in a bad grade for me or try to punish me in any sort of meaningful way. So I was still vicious to her. But if there's a teacher that can and will mess with you if he or she needs to, then just shut up, okay? If you want to become a doctor and your biology teacher is an asshole and he's completely stupid, and then you go to this teacher and this teacher says something stupid maybe in the class and you try to stand up for yourself, let it go, because this person can, if you want to become a doctor, can fuck up your dreams with the draw of a pencil. So it's just not worth it. It's so much better to just stay quiet in those situations. Now, for this one, you also kind of have to know your rights a little bit, because again, I'm saying this because in the country where I come from, a teacher can literally do this and fuck your life. And nobody can ever say anything about it. If some teacher fucks with you in that country, you're not able to turn to anybody. You can turn to the principal, he cannot do anything. You can turn to all the helping agencies for students or whatever. Oh wait, you actually can, because they don't fucking exist. And even if they do, they will never fucking respond to you. Nobody ever gives a shit. If you're a teacher in that country, you are, in a sense, a dictator. If you're strong enough, you can do whatever you want to. You have complete control over what you do. And there were a couple of teachers who were like, no, but what if the, I don't know, the, what is it called? What if the people come to check on how I was teaching? That never ever happened in my life with any of the teachers that I went to. I had teachers who were teaching me the same fucking methods that weren't good according to the law for 10 years straight, and they never got any repercussions, any negative effects of that. Nobody ever gave a shit. In places like that, it's a good idea to just shut up if something is not particularly important, and your teacher can again fuck your life with the draw of a pencil. But in other countries, like what I've heard, for an example, here what they have is a teacher cannot just randomly give you a bad grade for behaving badly in class, and in that case it really doesn't matter. And then the teachers will switch into bosses as you become an adult. Most of the times it's not worth arguing with your boss. Now, in order to know when to shut up and when to stand up for yourself, you need to learn to identify when you're the boss and when you're not. So if your teacher is not able to do anything to you because she's a German teacher and German doesn't matter in your life and it won't matter in your career, then you're the boss. There's maybe a teacher who can actually do something, but you know that the teacher will never do it. You're the boss. If you work in a place where your employer is always desperate for workers and never has enough workforce, you're the boss. Although I'm stating that I'm not taking any responsibility. If you end up getting a shit grade in school or get kicked out of your job because you did some stupid shit, don't fucking blame me. You made the decision, not me. And the fourth and last thing is to manage your energy. This kind of ties into what I talked about earlier with managing your time, but this is your energy. Again, you cannot possibly do everything. You have to identify what's important and what isn't, and where to pour your energy towards and where to not. I knew that I don't have to pour my energy towards the German class, so I never did it. I never put almost any energy into it. It was very funny because in high school I had a couple of classes where if I never put any energy towards the class, I could still go on with like a 3 or a 4. In German, I did have to pour some energy into it in order to not fail, because this teacher was fucking horrendous. Like, you know, even if you would pay attention in class but would not study, you would still fucking fail. Another thing is biology. I didn't give a shit about biology, so I never really learned any of it. I did learn some in order to not get like overly shitty grades, and in order to, like, you know, for the teacher to not completely hate me, but I didn't really do a lot of it, to be honest, and it never got back onto me. I could have gotten A's in biology in every single year. Would I have gained anything in my life from that? No. Would I have lost a significant amount of time for that? Yes. Chemistry was another funny one. I had to study chemistry in the first 2 years of high school. For all of those 2 years, what I did was, it was very strategical. We would write big tests a couple of times every year. So we had maybe like 4 or 5 tests every year that we would write that would matter a lot. And then we had this thing where I don't know if they do it in the US or like any other place. I don't know what it's called in English, but it's basically the teacher calling out maybe one single person, or sometimes even more, sometimes two at once, or sometimes separately, and just ask the person about something that we learned previously. And it's going to be completely random questions. It's also very unfair because it's completely subjective. You can be very good, and if you have a face that the teacher doesn't like for some reason, you can get a shit grade. But what we're focusing on here is she would have one of these every single time that we would have a class. And what she did was she would roll 2 dice, and she would determine based on that who would come to tell us what we learned in the previous class. And I never fucking studied to that one. I did study in like probably the first 2 weeks of high school, and then I was like, okay, fuck it. For 2 years straight, we had chemistry twice a week. And learning this shit, depending on how well you learned it, if you learned it to get an A, it would take sometimes half an hour, sometimes an entire hour. If you would learn it to get a B, then it would take maybe like 20-30 minutes on average, because sometimes we would have like longer or shorter stuff. And except for probably the first 2 weeks of high school, I never fucking studied for this shit, because it would have taken so extremely much time that it's just impossible to say. And I didn't want to waste all of this fucking time on nothing, because guess what? I never got rolled. During the 2 years, I never studied a second on that shit, and I never got rolled. I put very little energy into chemistry. I would learn for the big tests a little bit, but even then, the very first time I was like, this is like 30 pages of theory. I cannot possibly process all of that shit and actually learn it, because it was like, it's chemistry, bro. I didn't understand a single fucking word of it. It was all in weird like chemist language, so I just didn't fucking learn it. And then we had a couple of tests that were basically like master's chemistry, but they were like calculating tests, so they were mostly math. And actually, from the very first test, I realized that this teacher would always put in like maybe 10% theory and the rest would just be calculations. I would just pay attention to the 2 classes before the test when we would do the calculations, and then I would always get either an A or B. And I closed the first year with an A. The second year, I honestly have no fucking clue. I think it was either an A or a B, even though I probably put in like less than 10 hours of studying into chemistry during the 2 years together. We also had art class. I didn't even go to art class. I went to art class for like the first 1 or 2 years, and I realized that we weren't doing anything, and that there wouldn't be any consequences if I didn't go to art class. And so I think from like 3rd grade, I never went again. So I almost completely ignored a lot of the subjects. I focused all of my efforts. I was very unwilling to put in a lot of time into studying, and every single hour of studying almost that I put in would be on the 3 biggest subjects that I had to get an exam from in the end. There were 3 very important subjects. There was also English that I had to take a test from, but I speak English, so that doesn't matter. And then there was something that you could choose that only mattered when you did the exam during the last year. I chose kind of the easiest one, and I barely studied for that, and I passed it with an A. So I managed my energy really well. And this is very, very important. Managing your energy and just deciding what to focus it on and what to ignore is very important, because you don't have unlimited energy. And most of my energy I focused on myself. Most of my energy I focused on sleeping enough, on going to the gym. You know how many times I skipped studying to some stupid test? A lot of times. You know how many times I skipped going to the gym? Not a lot of times, honestly. I had like 1 year where I didn't skip a single session, and I was going 6 times a week. I don't do that anymore, because I go like 4 times a week, because I realized that you don't have to go 6 times a week. But even with that fucking rigorous schedule, I would never skip a session. I focus my time and energy on having a good diet, again, going to the gym, sleeping enough, learning the languages that I wanted, planning my country moving at the end of high school, learning about business and making videos. And I'm very grateful that I did all of that, because it pays off, and it will especially pay off in 10 years. I already see a very big difference between me and all of the other people, but the difference is not that big yet. But the thing is, all of these things will compound over time. And you know, we have like 5-year meetups in the school. There was no meetup yet, because I haven't exited school for that long of a time, but I'm very interested to see where all of the other people will be at 5 years after graduation. Probably nowhere, because they will just be finishing university, and I will hopefully be somewhere. And 10 years from that time, the difference will be insane, and I'm really looking forward to seeing it. So yeah, that's it for today. Write in the comments what you learned in school, which wasn't math or history or some stupid shit, and click this video next.